On this Wednesday night, an extraordinary moment at the White House. U.S. President Biden welcomes President-elect Trump to the Oval Office.
Donald, congratulations.
With Republicans in total control of Washington, will Trump have free rein? Plus, the loyalists getting top jobs in Trump's cabinet. Beefing up border security.
I expect there to be some tough conversations.
The warning to Canada from Trump's new border czar. Soccer surveillance, how long the Canadian women's team has used drones to spy on competitors, and what's still a mystery.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. President Biden has welcomed his successor to the White House, inviting President-elect Donald Trump, who Biden repeatedly called a threat to democracy, to discuss the transition. Trump doesn't move in until January, but Biden's spokesperson says he wants to make sure there's a smooth transfer of power. They talked for nearly 2 hours, the White House calling it substantive. It is a contrast to 2020, when Trump lost to Biden, refused to meet to discuss the transition, and encouraged his supporters to storm the Capitol. This time, Trump is wasting no time choosing his team. He intends to nominate Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary, Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, and Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. We'll have more on them in just a moment. It is now also clear the Republicans have a monopoly on power, retaining the majority in the House of Representatives, meaning they control both houses of Congress and the White House. Jackson Proskow has our top story tonight.
Washington is no mystery to the former and future president.
Donald, congratulations. Thank you. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition.
He was welcomed back into the Oval Office by Joe Biden, a courtesy Trump famously did not extend after his own loss 4 years ago when Biden was incoming president.
Thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get.
The pair met privately for 2 hours. What they discussed is a mystery.
I think by the length of the meeting tells you that they had an in-depth conversation on an array of issues.
It's nice to win. It's always nice to win. A lot of good friends in this room.
Trump also met with Republican House members who are expected to push through his agenda with a slim majority.
We owe him a great debt of gratitude. He is a singular figure in American history.
Behind closed doors, the president-elect even joked about sticking around for a constitutionally prohibited third term, saying, "I suspect I won't be running again unless you say, he's so good, we've got to figure something else out."
We will do the job that the founders intended us to do.
At the Capitol, Republicans in the Senate are already signaling that Trump won't exactly have free rein, selecting Senator John Thune as majority leader to replace Mitch McConnell. Thune's first act will be overseeing approval of Trump's cabinet picks. Trump has said he wants to skip traditional confirmation hearings. Thune has signaled that may not fly.
We want to make sure our committees have confirmation hearings like they typically do, and that these nominees reported out to the floor.
All of it a test of how far Trump can go in his return to power, and whether Republicans are willing to go along with him.
And Jackson's with me now. Jackson, among the flurry of announcements today, Trump said he'll nominate Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. She's a former Democrat. She was a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. She served in Iraq. Why are there concerns about her?
Well, look, Donna, not only did Gabbard switch parties, but she has also embraced Russia's position toward Ukraine and to Syria. Russian state TV has referred to her as, quote, our friend Tulsi, and she has even suggested that the U.S. is the one that provoked Russia into aggression. At the end of the day, she also lacks the key experience in intelligence matters that would be part of the job.
And Jackson, what about Matt Gaetz? Trump intends to nominate him as Attorney General. Gaetz is a Florida congressman. He's a fierce Trump loyalist. He likes to spar and insult his political foes. Why might Trump want him as AG?
Yeah, so look, this was the surprise of the day. No one saw this coming. Matt Gaetz, to be blunt, is despised by members of his own party in both the House and the Senate, and he's facing multiple investigations and ethics probes into alleged sexual encounters with teenage girls. And yet, his appointment is the clearest sign yet that Trump is going to do whatever he wants to do. And you can expect that Gaetz was chosen because he is someone who may be willing to politicize the Justice Department and go after Donald Trump's perceived enemies. Both he and Gabbard, though, are going to face real challenges in winning over enough support from within the Republican Party to actually make it into their planned posts. Donna?
Okay, Jackson in Washington, thanks. We've heard a lot about migrants crossing into the U.S. from Mexico, but now the man Donald Trump intends to put in charge of border issues claims there is a huge national security issue along the Canada-U.S. border, too. Tom Homan intends to tackle the problem, he says, as soon as he gets the job formally. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson looks at the impact that could have on Canada.
America's concerns about the border with Mexico loomed large in the U.S. election. Now the incoming Trump administration is putting Canada in its sights, too.
It's an extreme national security vulnerability on the northern border, and it's one of the things I'll tackle as soon as I'm at the White House.
Tom Homan, Trump's top lieutenant on the border and immigration, taking his message to upstate New York's 7 News, saying there has to be an understanding from Canada that they can't be a gateway to terrorists coming into the United States.
If Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh don't think that he's going to be hardcore with Canada, they have another thing coming.
Recent high-profile cases demonstrating security failures in Canada's immigration system have caught the attention of U.S. authorities. Ahmed El-Didi appeared in an ISIS propaganda video where he's allegedly dismembering a prisoner in 2015. He was granted Canadian citizenship in May of 2024 and arrested a couple of months later, charged with planning a major terrorist attack in Toronto. 20-year-old Muhammad Khan came to Canada from Pakistan on a student visa. He was arrested by the RCMP as he prepared to be smuggled across the border into the U.S., allegedly to carry out the largest terror attack on New York City since 9/11. Proof, analysts say, the U.S. knows Canada is failing to sufficiently investigate who's entering the country or forcing offenders out.
We don't have the intelligence capacity. We don't have the enforcement capacity.
The U.S. Customs and Border Agency says over 19,000 people entered the U.S. illegally from Canada over the last year, more than the previous 17 years combined.
I expect there to be some tough conversations.
If they perceive us to be a threat, that border is going to thicken and tighten. And we need to put our best foot forward.
And Donna, John Manley was Canada's foreign minister when 9/11 happened, so he knows all about balancing security with trade when it comes to the Americans. He told Global News he thinks Justin Trudeau should call an election so that the incoming government can focus on dealing with the Trump administration instead of being distracted by a potential upcoming election.
Okay, Mercedes, thanks. The cost of living in the U.S. ticked up in October, driven by the price of rent, used cars, and airfares. Inflation there rose by 2.6% in the year up to October, up from 2.4% in September. It's the first rise in annual inflation in the U.S. in 7 months. Despite the uptick, interest rates are expected to be cut again in December. Ukraine claims Russia has launched its first missile attack on Kiev since August. That strike caused extensive damage to buildings in the Ukrainian capital and surrounding areas. It is a shift away from drone attacks that have been happening almost every night. Ukraine has long been pleading with its Western allies to provide long-range striking power. Today, Ukraine discussed that possibility with the U.S. and says it is cautiously optimistic. The Biden administration is promising to send every dollar of military aid it can to Ukraine before Trump takes office. Redmond Shannon reports.
The city of Vuhledar in eastern Ukraine, at least what's left of it, after it was captured by Russia last month. In Kiev, Russian missile attacks have resumed, adding to the months of drone barrages. Tatiana is the wife of a Ukrainian soldier. She says she often thinks about those who started the war. What is driving them, she asks. But many Ukrainians also fear this war could soon end in defeat if the United States withdraws its support when Donald Trump takes office in January.
Appeasement will not work.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha met his outgoing U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken in Brussels.
President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
The reality is that it's too little too late. And in many ways, this is the history of the Biden administration's policy towards Ukraine.
Analyst Aurel Braun believes any Trump deal that cedes land to Russia must also punish Vladimir Putin and put the rest of Ukraine under NATO's umbrella.
They need to be assured that NATO then would defend every square inch of what remains of Ukraine so they can rebuild.
Key to any negotiations will also be the part of Russia's Kursk region that Ukraine controls. Reports say 50,000 Russian troops are actively trying to take it back, with help from thousands of soldiers freshly arrived from North Korea.
There's a clear commitment that this gets, and it will get, a firm response from the alliance.
What NATO's response could be to North Korea's involvement is unclear, but every action NATO and the US take in the next 2 months comes with the caveat it could be overturned. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The southern coast of Spain is being hit with torrential rain and flooding again, just 2 weeks after flooding in the Valencia region killed more than 200 people. Thousands of people have been forced from their homes in the Malaga area as severe storms inundated some areas there with a month's worth of rain in just 1 hour. Argentina has withdrawn its negotiators from the UN climate summit in Azerbaijan. The government of President Javier Milei has ordered the country's delegates to the COP29 summit to return home. Argentina's far-right leader has called the climate crisis a socialist lie, and he's threatened to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. There's widespread concern about the future of that climate accord after the U.S. election. Donald Trump pulled America out of the agreement in 2020 and has pledged to do it a second time when he returns to the White House. Intense volcanic activity in Indonesia has grounded international flights and stranded travelers on the popular resort island of Bali. Satellite images show ash clouds and smoke rising high into the air. Yesterday, the volcano spewed lava multiple times. It began erupting more than a week ago, and at least 9 people have been killed. The scope of Canada Soccer's drone spying scandal coming up, how long the women's team has surveilled other teams, and why drones weren't used during the Tokyo Olympics. Plus, how the Winnipeg Jets scored their way into the history books. The Winnipeg Jets are soaring to new heights after they beat the New York Rangers. That win means they have now won 15 of their first 16 games this season, making the Jets the fastest team to get to 15 wins in NHL history. Winnipeg also ranks first in offense and defense. All I can say is, go Jets, go. Canada's soccer investigation into this summer's drone spying scandal was meant to shed light on what happened, but it's also raising new questions. The independent investigators' report was released Tuesday, the same day Canada Soccer announced it was parting ways with Bev Priestman, coach of the women's national team. But as Mike Armstrong reports, using drones to film opponents' training sessions started before Priestman.
They knew it was wrong, but went ahead with it anyway. Coaches with the women's national team reviewed drone tape as a group. According to the investigators' heavily redacted report, staff knew it wasn't right, but didn't feel they could challenge the authority of the woman at the top, head coach Bev Priestman.
The practice of drone usage was just so embedded. I can certainly understand why they didn't feel comfortable sort of challenging and raising the issue, because it would have made, life very difficult for them.
Joey Lombardi was an uncredited analyst with the team at the Paris Olympics when he was arrested by French police. He'd been filming with a drone in a restricted area. The reason he was there was to spy on the New Zealand team's practice. The report says the operation was approved and directed by 2 national team coaches. Now, one thing many wanted to know from the investigation was whether the women's team was also filming opponents during the 2021 Olympics, where it won gold. Well, the report says a drone wasn't used in Tokyo because COVID restrictions were too tight. The team's win doesn't appear to be tainted, but perhaps out of luck.
They didn't have, the leeway to be able to fly drones. But it's disappointing to note that it came down to restrictions to stop them from cheating.
Now, one thing raising eyebrows out of the report is that investigators never got to speak to Priestman's predecessor. John Herdman is currently coaching the Toronto FC in the MLS. There's reporting the women's team used drones when he was in charge, something he's denied, at least in big tournaments.
in my time as a head coach at an Olympic Games or World Cup. We've never been involved in any of those activities.
Now, investigators tried to meet with Herdman, but the two sides couldn't find a time that worked for both over 4 months. Sanctions could still be coming. Toronto FC says it's reviewing the report. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Ahead, the hot button issue being used as a tool on the campaign trail in the Maritimes. In the U.S., reproductive rights are now restricted in many states ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court there. Upholding the legal right to an abortion was a big issue in the election campaign, too. And though access to abortion is not legally restricted here in Canada, it is being used as a political tool. Heidi Petracek reports on where it's come up on the campaign trail and why.
Where does your party stand on abortion?
Pro-choice.
On the Nova Scotia campaign trail, Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston kept it brief when asked to reiterate his party's position on abortion.
I'm pro-choice. The party's pro-choice.
He was put on the defensive after the NDP issued a press release pinpointing comments made by an incumbent PC candidate, John Lohr, from an interview in 2018 with an anti-abortion organization in which he described himself as pro-life and said, quote, "I think there should be restrictions on abortion in the nation of Canada." Lohr couldn't be reached for comment. The PC campaign, in turn, accuses the NDP of trying to, quote, frighten women. With the Conservatives ahead in the polls, it's all political strategy.
The other parties will try to make people afraid that the Conservatives have a hidden agenda, and if given opportunity, they will do scary things, particularly on abortion.
Abortion shouldn't be a political issue.
At the same time, advocates say it is important to know where candidates stand.
Because they can have very real impacts on abortion access.
Abortion is legally enshrined in the Federal Canada Health Act, but provincial politicians have used their jurisdictional power to impose restrictions.
Everyone deserves access to the care that they need.
New Brunswick's new Liberal Premier Susan Holt recently repealed a 1984 ban on public funding for abortion clinics, something the province's former Conservative Premier balked at, putting Blaine Higgs at odds with Justin Trudeau.
Abortion comes up in all kinds of different elections.
The bitter abortion battle in the U.S. and Donald Trump's re-election shows how divisive it can be. But recent polling on this side of the border shows most Canadians remain in favor of a woman's right to abortion.
A lot of protections in place. And what we need to focus on is improving access to abortion care services, but also as part of our public health care system.
In the Nova Scotia election, the main parties have all promised to expand women's health care in different ways. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Are you ready for it?
Next, how will Taylor Swift's Toronto shows stack up against other artists who have come through the city? It's the eve of intense excitement for Taylor Swift fans in Canada. The first of her 6 concerts in Toronto is tomorrow. The Eras Tour, the scale of it, the excitement feels unprecedented. So Eric Sorensen went to the venue today to get a feel for the energy and to put Swift's concerts into pop music perspective.
The giant friendship bracelet gives it away. Toronto, the next stop for Taylor Swift. Delirious fans snatching up merchandise for one of the biggest concerts in the city's history. Maybe the biggest, says Xavier Sweeney.
She's huge. It's the biggest artist ever.
This mom of a Swiftie has seen a lot of concerts come through Toronto.
We sure have. Well, I think she's topped them all.
If so, it's an impressive list that she tops. Toronto has hosted the biggest names of all, going way back. Elvis Presley delighted Toronto teens in the 1950s. The Beatles had crowds lined up at Maple Leaf Gardens. And just last year, Toronto again hosted that other mega star, Beyoncé.
One of the things that happens when you bring in a big event to a city is that you give it a global
stage. Toronto is in a unique geographic position because how many hundreds of millions of people are within an 8-hour drive of the city?
Toronto has a long history of hosting major music events. Among the biggest concert tours here in Toronto, U2, 15 years ago here at the Rogers Centre. Bruce Springsteen at the old Exhibition Stadium back in 1985. The Who had a massive concert, 75,000 fans in 1980. And then there are the Rolling Stones. They've had some of the biggest concerts in Toronto, but none bigger than what was called SARSstock. A play on Woodstock, the biggest concert of all, it was a revival for Toronto after the SARS epidemic. Headlined by the Rolling Stones in front of almost 500,000 people. The Stones hold a special place in Toronto's concert history, not just the big ones, but one of the most famous small concerts for a few hundred people at the El Macambo in 1977. All part of a shared Toronto experience.
It brings us together, a connection between music and live music in particular, and the vibrancy of the city and kind of livability is arguably really important.
As for Taylor Swift,
This generation's version of like those kind of big, like those big musical events.
but the biggest ever, Xavier?
Yeah, of our generation, biggest artist I've lived to see. Yeah. That is a better way to put it.
Fair enough. 6 sold-out stadium shows, certainly a high point in the history of one of the world's premier concert cities. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Toronto's Rogers Centre, and another look at that giant friendship bracelet ahead of Swift's first concert tomorrow night. Swifties love to make the bracelets, wear them to concerts, and trade them with each others. Even Eric Sorensen says he got one. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.